It's the Happy Families Podcast. It's the podcast for the time-poor parent who just wants answers now.
One of my favourite things about the Happy Families podcast is talking to awesome people. One of my favourite people in media today is somebody called Angela Mollard. If you read any kind of media online or even the old-fashioned way with paper in your hand, you will have come across Angela Mollard's writing. Angela is an experienced columnist, skilled in journalism, radio, television, magazines and newspapers. Angela, I think we've been on TV together before.
We did.
Yeah.
We used to be on Channel 9 together on Today Extra we used to do. And we used to thrash things out and it was lovely. You were the highlight of my week sometimes.
Always fun. Not just contributing to TV and writing weekly for the News Corp papers on a range of topics, one of which is parenting. You showed up recently in, do you say Marie Claire or Marie Claire? I've never known.
Marie Claire. Which one did you see there, and why were you buying Marie Claire, Justin?
No, well, I was just Googling around and seeing what else you'd been up to. I can't even remember what the article was, but I do know that I really enjoyed it because I did the three of the Matildas before they went overseas, and I did Elizabeth Debicki from The Crown, and I've done Teresa Palmer and Isha Ketty. I love working for Marie Claire. They're a gorgeous magazine. I don't think it was any of those, but whatever it was, it just drew me in. It drew me in, and I thought, this is why I love Angela Mollard. I need her on the podcast because of a recent article that you wrote for the News Corp papers, which is that parenting needs a PR job. We've got a PR problem when it comes to parenting, and your argument basically is that I don't know, people who are sort of in their 20s and 30s are looking at parenting and saying it's kind of hard. It correlates with some research out of Europe. I came across a study from Germany that indicated that most German couples are opting for 0 or 1 children because once you get past 1, well, it's harder again, and so there's a lack of desirability on our younger generation around parenting. Once upon a time, having kids was just what you did. You had to consciously opt out of parenting a generation or two ago, whereas now young people seem to be consciously determining whether or not they will opt in because they're worried about careers and houses and deposits and dollars and accomplishment and figuring out who they are, just identity stuff. I loved your article. Where did it come from? What was the idea behind it?
Look, most of my articles come from just listening to hearing people having conversations, and I have friendships with people in their late 20s and 30s and some, through relatives and things. I can hear this conversation. And I was actually speaking to someone, a couple who were getting married about a week before I wrote this piece. And it was just like, gosh, all our friends, they've started having babies there, and these two were in 32. And they said, none of them make it look or sound any fun. They're always talking about how tiring it is, they're always exhausted. Some had even gone so far as to say, you should think seriously about doing this. It really changes your life. And it really made me think about it. I think since the turn of the century and the sort of, since we started having mummy bloggers, I think the whole notion of talking about parenting has largely been, and, it's great to talk about the vulnerabilities and to be open about it rather than simply just brushing it under the carpet. But I do think that we've spoken so much about how bad it is that we've forgotten to talk about the joy of it.
Even as you're saying that, I'm thinking about mummy bloggers and Instamums and the TikTok parenting. I mean, it's almost rabid in some sections. And there's a whole lot of people who are not experts who are masquerading as experts and telling parents how to do it. And for the most part, they make parenting look hard. Like when you go away and try to be a quote unquote gentle parent, it never quite works out the way that it looks on social media. It looks really hard. Question for you. Did your parents complain about how hard it was to be a parent like modern parents do?
Fantastic question, Justin. Not at all. Never have. Even now, my parents, they envelop their grandchildren. They have them living with them for periods of time. My grandparents have one of their grandchildren from Japan living with them for this year. They've had others living with them. They have always embraced it and believed it just a normal part of life that doesn't actually require as much commentary as we currently give it. They always made, growing up, my mum always made me feel that myself and my brothers were number one. Her life revolved. She was a teacher and a special needs teacher, so she had a big job. She still sees kids along the way. And I always felt like I was just the center of her universe. And I interviewed her recently because she's turning 80. And I thought, and, even listening to her, because I wanted to interview her
just in case, will she ever to get to dementia or anything like that, that I have a record of some parts of her life. And what shone through was just how much she enjoyed it. She just enjoyed raising 3 kids. But she did make the point there wasn't the expectation for the children to perform, for the children to get to this birthday party, for kids to look a certain way on social media or to perform at school. We just bumbled along. And, I just went to the local co-ed secondary school. I felt, and she talked a little bit about where hunger came from kids themselves rather than from expectations put on them from parents. And I think that made it easier for parents and easier for children.
Angela, this idea of your mum being fulfilled by the role of mother, do you think that fulfillment is still evident in 2024? Do you think that parents are looking at the role of parenting and saying, yes, this is number one, what I'll be doing. I don't have to opt in or out. It's just what I do. And number two, I expect it to be fulfilling. And could that be part of the problem as well for all of those times? Let's face it, a lot of the time parenting is not fulfilling. It is actually, it's a bit of a grind. There's a lot to do.
It can be boring. It can be grindy. I think we measure it more than we ever used to. We focus on outcomes more than just letting it flow. But to answer your question about, do you think it can be fulfilling? One of the reasons I wrote this piece is that I woke up one morning from a text from my daughter, who is 20. She was upstairs. A possum had got into her room at night, and she'd sent me a message overnight saying, "Mum, there's a possum in my room. I didn't want to wake you up, but I think it might be a 2-man job to get rid of it." And I lay there in bed before I jumped up and went to deal with the possum. I lay there and thought, this little girl used to come into my bedroom every night for a year. It used to do my head, and I was so tired. And then one day she just stopped, and I realized that everything in parenting just passes. And if you just go, okay, this is just happening now. Now I have this 20-year-old, this fully grown adult who dealt with this problem herself, went up there and after I'd lain there for 10 minutes, just really reflecting on, I've raised an adult and she can now deal with things on her own, including a possum. And I went upstairs and the possum had got itself out through the window that had come in. There were droppings all over her desk next to her perfume bottles and her books. And I just thought, wow, I'm so fortunate that I've created this human, and I get these experiences all the time. Look, I will say there were moments in the park when I was pushing them and I had a deadline, and as a journalist, I have a very sort of erratic working life, but I'm really grateful. There's nothing in my life that means more than them. And I'm so grateful I had them. And I just don't hear that story anymore. I don't hear the joy of it. I hear how tired it is, how I need to have a glass of wine to get through it. And I'm not critiquing any of that. But I just wonder if we were more present with it. And if we, one of the reasons I wrote the headline as I did, that it needs a PR job, is that the government, the treasurer, is talking about we need more kids. The birth rate's fallen, it's dropped significantly in cities. But rather than just saying have a child, we're not really showcasing how joyous it can be. And I just think if we can encourage more conversation about it, so that when that 30-year-old sits down, we're thinking about having a baby, the friend says, oh yeah, we had a hard night, but honestly, that little smile just makes my day. I just don't think we're hearing that. We skew to the negative.
Angela, I've become a grandfather in the last year, and it's brought back the most joyful and delightful parts of what parenting is. I sense, as I'm listening to what you're talking about, that a lot of people are focused on the short term. And the short term is poo explosions that go up the back and out the neck of the jumpsuit. The short term is sleepless nights. The short term is I don't want to eat my dinner on the green plate. I want the blue plate. And of course, we've got things like diagnoses and the work juggle trying to get family life around that. And yet I see that little soon-to-be 1-year-old smile at me, and I almost want to weep. It's so gorgeous. And the long term of parenting is, as you've said, seeing this 20-year-old deal with the possum that got into the room overnight, and I don't know, your child still managed to survive, didn't end up with scratches and have her eyes gouged out by that possum. The long term is becoming a grandparent. That's a really long term play, but oh my goodness, I'm getting weepy just thinking about it. The long term is seeing your child achieve something where they defy the odds. The fulfillment that comes from that is so extraordinary. But I wonder if you were to reflect on what you wrote in this article about parenting needing a PR job, and if you were to take the straw man argument that so many make that parenting is too hard and turn it into a steel man where we argue that parenting is worth it, while still maintaining that sort of short-term focus. Because when you're talking to a 24-year-old or a 34-year-old, they're not really looking 20 to 30 years down the track. They're just thinking, I've got to go through 20 to 30 years of investment and pain to get to this payoff that I'm describing. How would you still man that short-term argument?
I'd go macro over micro. We're always thinking about the micro. We're always thinking about this 1 minute when this kid is putting their fingers into the PowerPoints, or when, as you say, they want the green plate, not the blue plate, or they have had a meltdown in the supermarket, or they're not sleeping. That's all micro. Those are all micro, just as you have micro experiences in the workplace. You, as a journalist, I might spell something wrong, or there's something grammatically incorrect, or I'm trying to get an interview with someone and I don't get it. They're all micro. The macro is that I've loved my journalism career. So if you take a macro approach to parenting, it's pulling back out from the micro. So actually draw your lens back out as if you've got a camera on it. Sail above it. Take a bird's eye view on it and think, where will this be? What was it like for my parents? What was it like when these children potentially do have grandchildren? Just pull back the lens and think, what could this be in years to come? I can't, even if you can't really envisage it, use your imagination, because there was a reason you had them in the first place, right? You didn't just, most people would have planned having a child. You would have imagined some kind of magic, okay? And the magic that created them, we all know the magic that mostly creates them. Sometimes is, there's other magic. IVF is magic too. Try and impart the magic that led you to create them to the magic that you'll end up with in the end. And not just in the end, every year, every day. There's some, there might be something hard or something negative, but there's still magic. But I think one of the hardest things is that the negativity around parenting has grown as we've had dual working parents. And I think we've lent into that. Productivity means we do that. It's a different lifestyle. We have more kids in childcare. I totally understand all of that. But I wonder if we also think about legacy. Like, I know a lot of kids at school, they do this thing in their later years where they think about what they're encouraged to think about what their legacy will be. I think your legacy when you're parenting, I've had times when I've given my all to my work, like I'm on a deadline. Even the other night, my daughter wanted me to watch the NRL with her, and I was trying to deal with something sitting on later that night I went, she just really wanted me to watch the footy with her. Why did I not watch the footy with her? I was just thinking I had to deal with this thing right now. I think just sometimes what's the end game here? And the end game is that you have these beautiful people in your lives forevermore, hopefully.
The key word, perspective.
Yeah, it is. It really is perspective. And, I don't know how we actually do it. I don't know how we sell it, but it feels to me like we need an ad campaign around it, just as we did with smoking and seatbelts. And if we really want to encourage parenting, and look, I did this Child Free by Choice feature last year, 3,000 words for Weekend Magazine, for News Corp. And I was really interested in what all these people had to say. A lot of them, it was environmental. A lot of them, it was cost of living issues. I understand that. I do understand how expensive it is. But I wonder whether we were to talk more about that moment when they snuggle into your bed and all the lovely things that you get, when they talk to you, if you could record their conversation and listen back to it sometimes. That's so funny. My daughter, when she was little, when she said, was asking about how she was born, and she said, when you were pregnant with me, if you did a handstand, would I have come out your mouth? Like, she couldn't conceive of how you could have a baby in your tummy and it not fall out. I don't know. I just think there's magic that you don't expect, and that we don't give up on it, but we forget it.
Angela, I want to share a story with you. It's a story that I've shared in my presentations over the years, and I'd love to get your reaction to it as we come to a conclusion. The story's actually got nothing to do with parenting. It's a story about a young man who heard about a gold rush in the West. So he packed up his things and decided to go and make his fortune. He sat down by the river and he panned day after day after day, looking for all of the gold that he was hearing about. Nuggets were apparently rolling down the river. And all he was finding was rocks. He'd pull another rock out of the pan and add it to the pile beside him day after day after day, all of these rocks mounting up beside him until he's destitute, he's got nothing left, and he knows that he's going to have to go home and ask his parents to take him back so he can start his life all over again, just a lot poorer than he had been before he went out to the gold fields. As he was preparing to pack up and leave, an old man, a wealthy prospector, walked past him and kicked at the pile of rocks and made the astute comment, "That's quite a pile of rocks you've got there." To which the young man responded, "There's no gold here, just stupid rocks. I've worked, I've given everything, I've lost everything, I'm going home." The old man picks up one of the rocks and he cracks it open on the edge of the pan, and as he holds it open, a whole lot of gold flecks glisten, reflecting in the sun. And the wise old prospector says, "You're sitting on a pile of gold right here." The young man responds, No, I'm not looking for gold flecks. I'm looking for nuggets like you've got in your pouch." The old man opens the pouch that's on his belt, and the young man is chagrined, surprised to see that the pouch is full not of nuggets, but of gold flecks. To which the old man responds, "Young man, it's a steady accumulation of these flecks of gold that has made me rich." As I hear you talk about parenting needing a PR job and the things that you've shared in this podcast, which have just been beautiful, so heartwarming, my sense is that the best PR job we could have is to notice the thousands of flecks of gold that pass by us every single day in the river of family life.
I love that. It's kind of like glimmers, isn't it? Noticing glimmers. I saw that word recently. When something just glimmers, it catches your eye. It
Beautiful.
doesn't have to last very long. It's just a moment. It's just a moment. Inhabit it, see it, feel it, because that's all we ever have is glimmers. There is not some moment that you arrive at some imagined tomorrow that is perfect, where your child is perfect. That's not just what life is. It's just this. Parenting is an opportunity to be at the coalface of life, doing it beautifully some days and struggling other days, and just finding it all enriching. Because if it's all just smooth and even, that's not a life. It's never going to be a life. So parenting's the same. It's an appreciation that it's going to be, it's going to have moments, but as you say, and as that story shows, it's really choosing what you see. It's choosing what you notice. And if you choose to notice the negative, that's what your story will be. If you choose to notice those little flecks of gold, that's what your story will be.
Parenting needs a PR fix. Angela Mollard, I vote for you as the person to lead the campaign.
Oh, like you, Justin, mine are a bit more grown up now, so I'm handing the baton on to the younger parent. But talk about it. Talk about the great stuff.
Well, there's something that comes, though, with being an older parent, and having been through it, you can see why it's so worthwhile. And I think you've done a beautiful job articulating that today. Thank you for your article, and thanks for chatting with me.
Thanks, Justin. It's a pleasure.
Angela Mollard, columnist, journalist, radio, television, magazine and newspaper writer and commentator and all the rest of it, most regularly with the News Corp papers on a range of topics, including the one that we shouldn't leave alone, parenting. The Happy Families podcast is produced by Justin Rollon from Bridge Media. For more information about finding the joy in parenting, please visit us at happyfamilies.com.au and check out my book, What Your Child Needs From You. It is a book about the joy of parenting, and I think that it will help you to get the reset that you need to make your family happier.